As a nation, we're getting fatter. More than 1/4 of Australian adults are now obese. That's up from just 11% in the late 1980s. Or put another way, since the mid-1990s, men are, on average, 3.6 kilograms heavier. Women, 4 kilos heavier. And by one estimate, obesity is costing us $60 billion a year. Being obese is linked to a range of diseases, including type 2 diabetes, heart disease and a number of cancers. And now there's a medical debate in Australia over whether being obese should in itself be considered a disease, just as it is in the United States. Professor John Dixon from the Baker IDI Heart and Diabetes Institute is among those who thinks it should be.
We're treating a chronic disease. We use all the tools to treat every other chronic disease. Clinically severe obesity should not be any different.
Joining me is Professor Leslie Campbell of the Garvan Institute in Sydney, and with us from Melbourne is Professor Joe Proetto, Professor of Medicine at the University of Melbourne. Welcome to you both. Joe Proetto, first to you, what would you say are the main arguments in favour of categorising obesity as a disease?
If we define a disease as a pathological state that leads to illness, you've already mentioned all the problems that obesity causes, starting with type 2 diabetes. What about the causes? There is now overwhelming evidence from genetic studies, from adoption studies, that obesity has a very strong genetic basis. In addition, we now know that body weight is very vigorously defended by the brain, in that following weight loss, the hormones that control hunger that circulate in our blood change in a direction to make people more hungry, and hence making it very difficult to maintain weight loss.
So, Leslie Campbell, do you accept that definition of a disease and the idea that obesity and what makes us obese, what the body is doing, is something that fits that definition?
Well, my problem is that 30% of people that are defined by body mass index as obese are healthy without metabolic or other medical problems. And I think to define them as ill, as with an illness, may allow well-meaning but over-aggressive people in medical and other professions to target them with far too much zeal and to make their lives miserable.
What do you say to that, Joe Proetto, the 30% of so-called healthy obese who don't appear to be suffering from any sort of illness?
Well, I think Professor Campbell is right. There are a certain number of obese patients that don't seem to have the metabolic complications of obesity in the form of type 2 diabetes or metabolic syndrome. However, these patients still have problems with their joints, with possibly obstructive sleep apnea. Severely obese patients are not free, any of them are not free of some form of complication of obesity.
So what are the implications, Leslie Campbell, of treating obesity as a disease? You mentioned the targeting of the healthy 30%, but what about the 70%, the majority? What could it mean for them?
Well, I think we still have a problem that a large number of people will be put onto diets that, as Joe will have already implied, don't work, and will spend their lives attempting weight loss in various ways for reasons he's, I think, explained, that will cause them to feel guilty, develop eating disorders and have all sorts of problems trying to lifestyle control a disease which doesn't even have necessarily severe medical problems. I agree with him about the severe obesity and severe medical disease, but that is taking it right up to the top of the post of the numbers.
Joe Proetto, it almost seems to be saying that this disease that you describe is the human body acting as it was designed to do, to eat in times of plenty, to survive times of famine.
That is correct. That is correct. In fact, it's a disease now because of our current modern lifestyle, where we're in the fortunate position of having food the whole time and not needing to work physically to go and find the food. But nonetheless, it is still a genetically caused disorder, because these genes that we have in our body that have been enriched for during evolution are are there to safeguard us when there is no food. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen anymore. Or rather, fortunately, it doesn't happen anymore.
Leslie Campbell, you talk about the failure of the lifestyle interventions, the eat less, the slimming supplements and so on. Wouldn't it be a good thing if we look at this as a disease, then doctors can give medications that work or perform surgeries like lap band that can reduce weight?
I think that is true, that if we can give things that work. At the moment, I hate to say, again, I hate to speak against professionals and others, but there's an enormous exploitation of people who want to lose weight, partly for cosmetic reasons. And I think we have to recognise that a vast majority of weight loss in people is not because we're worried about their health, but because the social pressures are enormous. And these are being exploited by companies, by some professionals, naturopaths, by others who are offering poorly supported medications that are not TGA. So I can't at the same time say that I think that sort of thing is to be supported. I think we should do more research and give something, and we should be offering, both Joe and I have asked for more government-supported surgery for those who are having consequences of severe obesity. That is right, I agree. But the other stuff, please leave them alone because it's not working.
And Joe, do you agree that these non-medical interventions don't work for people that get into that category of being obese?
Yes, I agree with Leslie entirely on that. The great frustration about treating obesity is that people are very motivated, they lose weight, then they get this terrible hunger afterwards as a result of the body's defence mechanism, and they ultimately fail. Unless obesity is defined as a disease, we will never be able to have subsidised pharmacotherapy to suppress hunger and maintain the weight loss.
My approach is a little bit different. I want to say the opposite to Joe in a way, because diabetes is more my research. What we've found and published work on is people say, oh, you got fat, therefore you got diabetes. No, because you are a person who is going to get diabetes, you carry certain genes and therefore you got fat. So the genes you carry, if you are a relative of someone with diabetes, are genes that are going to make you fat. It's totally blameless, and that is the problem. So where are we going to go? Look for the genes, look for the pathways. These are rare genes, different ones in different people. We have got to look harder scientifically for the answers, and we will be able to present different pathways that will be treated by drugs. At the moment we have some surgery, bariatric surgery, and Joe and I have both campaigned to have suitable people treated with bariatric surgery of appropriate means.
Joe Pareto, do you think that we're making the right distinctions between what is overweight and what is obese, and indeed what is normal in an affluent Western society such as Australia? We hear these high numbers of overweight and obese, and yet we're all living longer, aren't we? Is it really that bad?
Yes, unfortunately, we do not make a distinction between overweight and obesity often enough. We seem to lump them all together. Mild overweight can be caused entirely by lifestyle, but it's the more severe end of the spectrum, if you like, that should be considered a disease. And are we living longer? Well, no. A study in the United States has concluded that the next generation will have a shortened life expectancy because of obesity.
Do you see it in those terms, Leslie Campbell?
Well, we've already got our benefit. I think we are living longer than we used to, and that, I think, perhaps if things go on worse, we will perhaps shorten a bit. But at the moment we are, as you say, we're living longer because of the famines that we've got rid of. I've mentioned famines. Thin people don't do well in famines. We've got genes to survive a famine. It depends what comes. If global warming comes, we may be all well prepared, and that may make a total difference to what future we face. We may not be facing excess forever.
Professor Leslie Campbell and Dr. Joe Pareto, many thanks indeed for joining us today. And you'll find all of our fact checks on our homepage, plus the election promise tracker, our fact check zombies, and past programs as well. And as always, you're welcome to have your say. Get in touch online, on Facebook or on Twitter.